Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today we are getting into the best food framework for fat loss. So I'm going to be talking through staple foods I want to include in a client's diet plan as often as possible. Now, I've spent 12 years refining client fat loss protocols and coaching hundreds of transformations. And truly, the biggest difference when it comes to fat loss between clients who do extremely well and make the fat loss process seem easy and those who it's an absolute grind for is going to be the foods that they select when they diet. So, really, I want to dig into helping you understand why certain foods create a physiological and psychological environment that's going to be more conducive to fat loss. This is also a big part of why we like meal plans so much in fat loss phases, is it kind of puts all of this on autopilot for you as a client and makes getting the result easier. Now, the caveat here is that, well, all of these foods are, of course, good ideas to include year round. It's not by any means like we have to be stuck to just this specific diet year round, but especially if we're talking fat loss, these are, again, really, if I'm building a client a meal plan, staples that I'd like to build a plan around. Now, foods that I'm going to discuss here aren't magic. They just make the process easier for a few reasons. First, they are going to really improve satiety. This is one of the biggest things that people don't consider when dieting, and oftentimes why like an if it fits your macros approach makes fat loss so hard. Especially when we're talking like lean women trying to go ripped, something that our team very much specializes in. I've had this conversation with quite a few clients lately, actually, where it's like, we're at the leanest position I have ever been in my life. Getting here was so much easier. Whereas, like, these clients were coming from places where when they started coaching, it was like, every time I try to get lean, like I'm lean, but try to get like from lean to fairly ripped, I struggle to get there because it's just such a grind. I'm so hungry. I feel absolutely terrible dieting. And like, wow, I feel so much better. What is the difference there? And again, that's what we're discussing here. Like, this is how we change that in part, alongside managing variables like your training and nutrition synergy, making sure that what we're doing with your training is recoverable from in terms of your nutrition as well. And basically managing this um, as a whole energy availability when it comes to like where's our body fat relative to our output with our movement, our training, and our input relative to our food, right? We need to consider all those variables. But anyways, the process we're talking about here is basically made easier when we improve our food selection, when we focus on what we're going to discuss here, because it helps improve our satiety. So basically it keeps us full longer, making the diet so much easier. Again, biggest piece that most people overlook, there is a huge difference between you hitting your macros and actually eating a diet that keeps us full, keeps us well fueled, while still getting the fat loss result. We want these foods to digest well. This is where even like a lot of diet foods, quote unquote diet foods, are a problem. Like cauliflower rice absolutely wrecks a lot of people's digestion. Protein bars, which people think of as like a diet food or a health food, a lot of times the gums in them, like your xanthan gums and whatnot, will again kind of destroy people's digestion. So we want to make sure digestion is at a good place. Our micronutrient intake is also very important. So making sure that we have the zinc, the selenium, etc., to support a healthy, responsive body. This is such an important part of things like supporting sex hormones, supporting your thyroid function, getting your omega-3s, right? If we are insufficient in our micronutrient intake, it will make fat loss harder because it is more likely that we will experience sex hormone or thyroid dysregulation. So again, your body won't be as responsive to the result we're trying to get. Food volume, we're also optimizing for here. This kind of goes hand in hand with satiety. So our gut has stretch receptors in it. Basically, when we eat a larger volume of food, our gut stretches a bit. Those stretch receptors being activated sends a satiety signal to our brain, and hunger levels reduce. So we can pull the volume lever to keep hunger lower, even if our total calorie intake isn't as high. Now, micronutrient density, total calorie load, and volume all play a role in satiety. But again, there are multiple levers there we can pull. The foods that I'm going to talk through here are also just easier to track with precision. This is another underrated variable of dieting successfully. Another reason why we're not a big fan or not big fans of more of an if it fits your macros approach when it comes to dieting. If we are, for example, like if I'm eating Chipotle or of various meal out that I don't see like the exact components and ingredients of measured and weighed out. Much harder for me to track accurately. But again, especially if it's like if what's on my plate is a bunch of foods mixed together, like a lasagna, I don't know like what the chef's recipe is who made that. Thus, it is so much harder for me to track it accurately because there are so many different ingredients that could be in there. And again, a huge range calorically that this could be. Whereas the foods we have here, again, it's pretty simple. We're going to make it easy to track, remove a lot of room for error, so there's no risk of extra calories sneaking in and slowing fat loss. And then also, ideally, our food selection is going to really be set up to support our ability to train hard, get the best training output, thus get the best training stimulus and recovery. So again, that's kind of what we're basing this structure or this framework around. Now, from there, when we are setting up a food structure, a meal plan, whatever it may be, there is kind of a hierarchy we're using to determining what this framework should look like. So first, I'm going to start with what should somebody's calories and macros look like. Next, I want to make sure we have their protein sources dialed in. Going to be very important for, of course, preserving or building new muscle, and also going to be a big lever when it comes to satiation. Protein is going to be our most satiating food, so incorporating a decent amount at each meal helps quite a lot. Similarly, I see if like you have a client who eats most of their protein in like 1 or 2 boluses and then has like larger protein meals or small, very, very low protein meals later in the day. Typically, they're a lot hungrier after those meals. Our food quality, our fiber, and our micronutrition are going to be the next priorities, right? So we have calories and macros determined. And of course, then, okay, what does our protein intake look like? And food quality to a degree ties into that as well. And then I'm kind of plugging in, okay, what are the other high quality foods, these micronutrient dense foods, these fibrous foods that I want to plug into the diet to make sure we have them in place. And then we're making sure we're nailing our meal timing around the training session. So, hey, do we have plenty of carbs? Ideally, both pre and post workout, we have a larger bolus of carbs. So based on that, let's walk through the food framework that I use when building diet plans to kind of illustrate how much easier physique transformation is if we have the right food sources. So let's get into some actual food sources, starting with our fat sources. So one thing that I will almost always want to include is an omega-3 supplement. This is going to be a great source of polyunsaturated fats, which are an essential fat that our bodies can't produce and is required for building cell membranes, brain function, and much more. Now we want 3 to 4 grams of EPA and DHA combined daily, not just fish oil. This is a big mistake people make. So actually look at the back of your bottle and look at how much EPA and DHA specifically is in it, right? If it says it has 1,200 milligrams of fish oil in the front, but it only has 300 milligrams of EPA and DHA, again, if we want to get like 3 grams of EPA and DHA from that supplement alone, we're going to need to take like 10 capsules of that, right? So we want to make sure that it is high in EPA and DHA. I personally really like the Carlson brand. There's Carlson Elite Omega or Carlson Max Omega. I believe the Elite Omega is like 1.6 grams of EPA and DHA combined for just 2 capsules. So 3-4 of those a day makes it very, very easy. Alongside what we're getting from other sources makes it very, very easy for us to hit our needs here. Next, whole eggs. I really, even when fats are quite low, almost always want to incorporate at least 1 whole egg in the diet. The egg yolk specifically is one of the most nutrient-dense foods we have available. We get a lot of choline, vitamin K, biotin, vitamin A, B vitamins. Again, very, very nutrient-dense. Nuts. Now, nuts are calorie-dense, so we will be playing with smaller servings and typically need to be strategic here. It will depend on where we're at. Like if we're deep in a fat loss phase, like a photo shoot prep, or below sustainably lean, we may be at the point where we've largely pulled these. But we can also strategically use these to support a client's specific needs. Now, we can use walnuts to get more omega-3s. Brazil nuts are great for selenium content, which helps support thyroid function. So for example, if we have a client who has like low T3, hey, low free T3, we might actually intentionally incorporate like a Brazil nut to get a decent bolus of, I believe it's like 100 micrograms of selenium roughly per Brazil nut. Almonds, we get magnesium, we get monosaturated fats. So we can use these, layer these in strategically based on what the client needs. But again, they are very calorie dense, not extremely filling. So we do typically have to go with smaller doses. These aren't something we just want to like go unmeasured or just want clients snacking on all the time in a fat loss phase. Pretty easy way to rack up calories regardless. Next, carb sources. Potatoes, which I believe should be a non-negotiable in most diets. They have, when we're looking at the satiety index of foods, so ranking of most filling to least filling foods, they are the most filling food option we have. They're also very micronutrient dense. Really, if you are trying to maximize satiety on a diet, like if we're pushing food is low, we're trying to keep someone as full as possible and low calories. I mean, I've done days where personally, like my diet was 3 meals that were a lean protein, so like a chicken breast, potato, and veggie. Probably the easiest way to stay full on low calories. We get a good amount of volume, we get a ton of satiety, but we can keep those meals quite low calorie. It's not exciting. It's not really supposed to be. Like if the goal is fat loss is the main goal. Making your meals like as tasty as possible is going to be counterproductive. The more tasty, the more hyper palatable a meal is, the more it will drive hunger. So there's actually some benefit to like us eating more plain, more bland foods like potatoes, because we will actually be full for longer versus if we try to make them more hyper palatable. That's where also like in a diet phase, I wouldn't go too hard. Again, it's okay to make your food taste good. But if you're making these elaborate meals and like spending hours trying to make this the most delicious meal possible, it will drive more hunger if we make it more hyper palatable. Next up, in terms of carb sources, we have berries, which I would consider another non-negotiable. When I am programming fruits into someone's diets, berries are going to be my first go-to almost always. Specifically, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries are going to be very dense in nutrients and antioxidants. Also a killer source of fiber, especially raspberries have a ton of fiber, so very satiating, relatively low calorie, and very nutrient dense. Strawberries are a very good volume hack. So if we want to ramp up the literal size of that meal and make it very filling, we can leverage more strawberries. So for example, 100 grams of banana is 89 calories, 100 grams of strawberry is 32 calories. So that's something we can incorporate to get quite a lot of fullness for very few calories. Oats are another staple when it comes to diets. Going to be a great source of both soluble and insoluble fiber, which is going to help with our digestion, basically keeping bowel movements solid and consistent. And then they're also going to be very filling and nutrient dense. And then, of course, some non-starchy vegetable. Now, what specifically here, I'm not too terribly biased as long as the client digests it well. But again, this is a very good both tool for getting in some of our micronutrition, and then also going to be very filling per calorie. So typically when I'm looking at building a diet, I am going to want someone, again, generally eating between our fruit and veg combined, like 500-ish grams per day, 400, 500 grams. And then when we are really focusing on leveraging more satiety, we can crank that up higher. And again, it will be dependent. Like we might have like a couple servings of berries and banana and like maybe like 200 grams of veg. I think like a general, like at least 200 grams of veggies per day per most people is a good rule of thumb. And then a couple servings of fruit. Depending on body size, like we will scale those numbers a bit. But again, that roughly like 200 grams veg per day and at least a couple servings of fruit. It's a good rule of thumb. And of course, you can do more veg than that if you would like. I wouldn't take it to the point, though, where we start to experience digestive issues, which can happen if we take this too far. Another very good option here, similarly, if we are in a place where we can't add calories, but we need to reduce hunger, is a big ass salad that could just be like a giant bowl of spinach or leafy greens, going to be very low calorie. And then just top that with a lean protein like a chicken breast and a low calorie dressing. Like we can get lots of like 5 to 10 calorie per serving dressings, like fat-free balsamic, for example. Not the most tasty always, but they get the job done. Or you can just put some mustard on there. The classic mustard salad, always a good option as well. But again, we can really use this to, if we are struggling with hunger, let's say we have a meal that is like chicken, rice, and 50 grams of veggie. The client, quite hungry. Hey, if we swap that for like a big ass salad, put the chicken on top of that, and then maybe we're going to swap that rice for let's say we swap, like it's a very small serving of rice by this point, and we swap it for, let's say it's like 100 calories of rice. Swap that for like 200, 250 grams of strawberries, which is a lot. I don't know if I'd bump the volume that high, but bear with me. Between that and the salad, we could get so much more satiety out of the same meal. Okay, next up are protein sources. So a couple staples here. First, non-fat Greek yogurt. This is going to be a staple for anyone who tolerates dairy well. It is very nutrient rich, so we get calcium, B vitamins, some selenium. Very good lean protein source. Very filling, going to digest fairly slow. It's also really versatile, right? So we can use it in lots of different formats. Lean beef when possible. So like think a 93.7 ground beef. We could even go like a 95, 96 lean ground beef. This going to be a great source of important micros. So iron, B vitamins, zinc, etc. Now, some clients just really dislike red meat, but otherwise it is a great protein and nutrient source. Probably one of our more underrated sources. Again, like whenever possible, I would say like this is, especially for women, again, we're going to get a good amount of iron. Such a good nutrient source. So whenever possible, I'm going to incorporate that. Chicken breast and or ground turkey. This is going to be kind of boring, but effective. There's a reason that a lot of bodybuilding diets have included these for decades. They're lean, they're easy to prep, they're versatile, they can kind of fit anywhere in your day. Now, we're not going to get the same micronutrition value from these as we would like our lean beef. But again, they give us a lot of protein, they give us a decent amount of satiety, and they are very, very, very low fat. It's a good way to hit our protein needs. And then finally, egg whites plus a whole egg. Again, I mentioned before, I typically like to include at least one whole egg for nutrient density. Now from there, we can add in a ton of egg whites. So let's say we're having like an egg meal. We have very low fat intake for the day. Okay, we can have one egg and then bolster that with a bunch of egg whites to drive our protein up quite high. I really like, I made a reel about this a while back. I will put that in the show notes. But basically, like you can just mix like a bit of dark chocolate, or you can like even go cocoa powder if we need to keep calories low, cinnamon, and then just like oats, a single egg, a bunch of egg whites, just cook it together, mix it up with a little bit of stevia, like this nice sweet meal. It's actually delicious. But egg whites are again like very, very kind of like a blank canvas, almost similar to your Greek yogurt, where you can use them in so many different formats, and it's almost just like free protein, but also a good way to get a lot of volume in. So let's walk through this framework in practice, what an example day could look like. So our morning meal could be an egg, egg whites, ground turkey, bell peppers. So think like a Southwest bowl with mixed berries on the side, like blueberry, blackberry, raspberry blend. Mid-morning, we could go with a chicken breast, potato, veg meal, and maybe we are looking with a client where we want more selenium, so we have a Brazil nut on the side. Early afternoon, we might have something like a massive spinach salad with chicken breast, walnuts, and again, mixed berries on the side. And then pre-training, maybe we go with something like lean beef, rice, so going to digest a bit quicker, a smaller amount of veg, and pineapple, going to be a mix of fructose, glucose, so again, we'll allow those carbs to be used quicker. Now, if we were in a place where maybe we're deeper in the diet, hunger is higher, and we're focusing on maximizing satiety more, hey, maybe we, again, instead of going like lean beef, rice, veggie, and pineapple, we might swap that rice for more potato. We'll digest slower, which again, we don't necessarily want pre-workout unless we're in a place where, man, like if this meal digests quickly, they're going to feel like it's shit in an hour because they're already so depleted and dieted down. So again, if that was the case, hey, we could swap this for potato. Maybe we would swap the pineapple for like a type of berry, again, if we needed more satiety. And then evening, we could do something like Greek yogurt, oats, almond berries, strawberries, potentially mix a bit of protein powder in there as well for flavoring, but I would make the large majority of the protein coming from the Greek yogurt. It'd be much more filling, much more volume than like a protein powder. So from there, again, that's a pretty easy way we could lay out a day. But again, in essence, this framework just kind of builds an automatic structure for easier fat loss. It keeps hunger manageable, which makes it easier to stick to the diet, which makes it easier to get shredded. It optimizes your micronutrient intake, which allows for better health, thyroid, and sex hormone support, which means fat loss and muscle growth outcomes are better as well. It supports better biofeedback, so we have higher energy expenditure, we have better training, meaning again, we have better fat loss and muscle growth. And then it is easy to measure precisely, leading to faster fat loss and less time dieting. So hopefully this was helpful. As always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you would like to apply for coaching with our team, hit the link in the show notes, and we will catch you guys next time.